It can be a really lonely ride as a business owner and as an entrepreneur sometimes. But what I've really learned and what I'd love to share is that you are not alone. And there's a lot of people out there that want to help you.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Local Business Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Nicolanti, on a mission to help you. This show is here to educate you, inspire you, and most importantly, motivate you to dominate your competition. Whether you're brand new and just opening your doors or looking to level up your existing business, you're in the right spot. Now, let's get this party started and talk some local business hacks. Welcome back, local business hackers. I have some awesome stuff we're going to talk about today. Our guest here today is Darryl Hicks, who is the founder and CEO of FlexPay. So, Darryl, welcome to today's call.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Thanks for having me.
So, Darryl we're going to dig into your business here in just a minute, but for everybody out there listening, there's some really cool things that are out there that you probably aren't taking advantage of. But what we're going to talk about, Darryl, is how you can find some what I like to call kind of bonus or magic money, and it's like hidden money out there that you're not taking advantage of.
Yeah.
So everybody needs to learn some of these tips, some of these tricks that Darryl has perfected over the years. So Darryl, welcome to the call. I'm telling you, do me a favor. Let's say you and I are riding on an elevator going to the 5th floor. Give me the elevator pitch real quick on FlexPay.
Yeah, we help e-commerce companies and really anybody that accepts credit cards over the phone or over the internet to reduce credit card declines. We are an AI-driven decline salvage tool.
So to reduce credit card decline. So essentially, we do a lot of our listeners are in the wellness world. So if they have a monthly subscription plan, so their card gets ran every month through their point of sale, through their CRM processing system, whatever. And let's say it expired. And so that's something where you help out with that and kind of recovering that money and keeping the payments coming in seamless, correct?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to divide churn, I was a merchant for a long time selling monthly recurring subscription programs, and eventually got so good at it that I kind of developed a reputation in the direct marketing world as being the optimization and efficiency guy. And so I launched a third-party administration business about 10 years ago and started running back office for some really big brands. We were completely transparent to the consumer, but we would answer the phone as the brand and we would take care of all the billing. And the way our pricing model worked in the third-party administration business, TPA for short, was we will only charge you if you make more money with less risk. And so we had this huge incentive to really get in and build tools to optimize the business. And the way that I look at, and to give you an idea of scale, like we sold to directly or serviced tens of millions of customers over 15 years in 4 different continents. We were big in Brazil, United States, Canada, UK, and Australia. About 70% of everything we did was in the US. And we had a lot of data. And again, this huge incentive built into our business to really optimize that. And I look at churn. If you want to have like the highest possible lifetime value on your customer base, I divide churn into 2 buckets. It's either voluntary churn, where people email you or call you up and say, I don't want this product or service anymore, or involuntary churn. And for a lot of the really good quality merchants out there, it's about a 60-40 split, with 60% being the involuntary stuff. And it still boggles my mind. I was on the phone with a really savvy serial entrepreneur, has had multiple businesses, and he just recently acquired this direct-to-consumer business, and they have like thousands of people that they charge monthly. And he was complaining to me about, it seems like we're losing just as many people as we're bringing in, and my member base is flat. And so I asked him that question, like, well, what are you doing about your involuntary churn? And he says, oh, that's not a problem for me. If it was a problem, my CFO would let me know, my director of finance would let me know. But no, our problem is all, it's all churn on people just reaching out to us and not wanting the product or service anymore. And I'm like, well, I'd love to know what you're doing, because you're obviously much smarter and better than me if that's really the case. So why don't you go take a look with your finance team? Comes back to me the next day and he's like, dude, you wouldn't believe this. 15.6% of all of our subscriptions are declining, and no one told me, because they just thought, well, that's normal. We must be tapped into a subprime demographic or something. It's just, if Visa tells you it's declined, right? No.
Right. And even that example I gave earlier was actually probably a poor example from our prior conversations with the expired credit card. Because involuntary churn is a whole lot more than that.
And expired cards is only about 4% of all the declines on average. So if you've got a pool of declines, 4% of that pool, not 4% of your whole business, but 4% of the ones that decline are going to be for expired cards. And there are good strategies out there for that. Account updater, if your listeners aren't. So one of the interesting things about this is that all kinds of businesses that used to be brick and mortar face to face never had this problem. Because if you look at the average decline rate in face to face business, it's 1.4% declines. That means 98.6% is the average across all transactions in America on Visa and MasterCard's rails. But now with COVID, everything's moving online. Right? E-commerce, all these people that used to have people coming into their branch, coming into their business, now they're accepting payments online or over the phone. And all of a sudden, especially the ones doing the monthly recurring are like, what in the world is all these declines? And a lot of people are thinking it must be because of COVID. It must be because people are stretched thin and they just don't have enough money. But no, actually, the average decline rate on face-to-face is 1.4. The average decline rate on e-commerce is 15.0. That's the average decline rate on all e-commerce transactions on Visa's rails in America today. And so the problem's really been exacerbated by COVID, with all these people now moving online. Like, I never had this problem in my business before. What the heck is going on? So if you are accepting payments online or over the phone, if you are especially running monthly recurring transactions, they're like account updater. We were going to talk about like free tools and hacks that you can have to optimize your business, but might as well just, since you're talking about expired cards, drop that one right now. Like account updater is huge. It's a free service that Visa and MasterCard run. You can access it through your merchant bank usually. And it's free to upload your entire database of all of your users, all the cards that you have on file. And if there are any updates, Visa charges you about 8 cents for the update. And they manage it on behalf of MasterCard as well. So you get both Visa and MasterCard updates. And I mean, look, to get updated card information and updated expiry date, or if a card is replaced for fraud or lost or stolen. Like, for example, I'm with Allstate Insurance, and I recently had to have my card replaced for fraud. And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to call all these different companies and give them my new card information. And sure enough, I forgot to call Allstate Insurance. And I'm like, oh no, I said to my wife, like, sweetie, like 2 months ago, I completely forgot to call Allstate. And then I went and looked at my statement. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they're charging the new card number. And I was like, oh, good for them. They're using account updater, right? So my old card number was canceled for fraud, but Allstate, obviously, very smart merchant, is using account updater, and they automatically got the new card number, and they're automatically billing my insurance policy. I'm happy, they're happy, everybody wins. So this is really low-hanging fruit, right? That everyone, but unfortunately, a lot of merchants just aren't aware of it. A lot of companies aren't aware of it, but that's a really great tool that will help with some of that involuntary churn.
Yeah, so I want to pause for a second. So everybody listening, if you are running any type of online payments or non-person to person transactions, if you're not doing that at the very minimum, you're losing money.
Yeah.
So that's a huge gold nugget for you guys just right now that you can take and use to reclaim and regain not only the customers coming back in and their activity, but also the money that comes along with them. So at the very minimum, if you get anything out of this interview here with Darryl, do that. You're going to get a lot more here as we keep talking. So Darryl, tell me a little bit about FlexPay. Who do you guys work with? Who's your audience?
So we work with, well, first of all, anybody who is in the e-commerce and recurring billing subscription world has this problem of false declines. And false declines is the terminology that the banks, the issuing banks, actually use. It's not Visa or MasterCard who decides if a transaction is going to be approved or declined. It's not your merchant bank. It's actually the issuer. That's the name of the bank on the piece of plastic on the card of your customer's card, right? And they're trying to keep fraud out of the ecosystem. They get it wrong a lot of times. They generate, MasterCard came out with a report that says about $440 billion a year in the US alone of false declines. That's before COVID. It's much worse now. We're just waiting for the updated numbers from the end of 2020. So pretty much anybody who's online, but definitely there are some sweet spots in there. I would say just people that are selling products that are discretionary, right? Where the onus is kind of on the customer, where, yeah, they love your product and they're engaged, but is it really going to seriously damage their life if all of a sudden their subscription with you lapses? If not, then really you have to be hyper-focused on mending your relationship with them. Again, I would argue that anybody that's in the online space or selling subscriptions should be paying close attention to this and doing something about it. But definitely if you're selling discretionary goods, I think the health and wellness space is huge for this. We service a lot of people actually in the health and wellness space, also SaaS businesses. We have some very large SaaS businesses that process, north of $700 million a year, who are using our service to kind of fix subscription payments. We work with charitable organizations because lately more and more of the revenue coming into charities is monthly donations, where someone signs up and agrees to donate monthly, and the card works for the first 4 or 5 months, and then all of a sudden it starts declining, and the charity's like, why? What's going on? And I love helping the charities. That's a real good feel good application
Right.
of our technology. We also work with a lot of direct marketers and DRTV merchants. That's direct response television advertisers. So I mean, it kind of runs the whole gamut. We even have some utilities. Cell phone. We just signed up a cell phone carrier, actually a small cell phone carrier that came to us to say, why do I have all these declines every month? And again, I wouldn't have thought that that's a sweet spot, because you need your cell phone. Like in 2021, everybody has to keep their cell phone service alive. And if your payment declines on your cell phone and they're threatening to cut off your service, you've got a huge motivation as the consumer to go fix that. So you'd think the cell phone carriers don't care as much because they know their customers are going to come to them to fix it. And yet still, this mobile carrier came to us and said, yeah, for sure, we have customers that reach out to us, but then there's all this friction and we have the customer service expenses. That if you've got an automated solution that can fix this behind the scenes, we'd love to hear about it. So
Automation makes the world go round nowadays.
there it does.
So that's awesome. So wide variety of customers. And as we, even like in Main Street USA, and as we see a lot of our businesses, and we're getting our business owners are forced to be a little bit more creative now in 2020, moving into 2021, where they're doing more things online. They're selling product. They're selling subscription plans, being creative because they're forced to. But I really love what that does. I mean, out of the craziest, hardest times, that really leads to more creativity, and that's when businesses are really made. That's when the true entrepreneurs have a chance to shine.
Absolutely.
So I love that FlexPay and kind of how you do things. It can just make it easier and give a bigger benefit to them and keeping things moving for them.
Yeah.
So something that absolutely need to look into this if you're doing anything with that online payment. So tell me a little bit about FlexPay. How long have you guys been around?
So I started dabbling with all this involuntary churn stuff in like 2006, 2007. I used to work with a bank in Boston and helped them develop some technology around fixing this. And I was their first client to actually use their decline salvage product. But then the bank sold to a bigger bank in 2012. And the bigger bank said, well, we don't care about solving this problem holistically. We just want to use this authorization optimization tool as a shiny object to attract and retain merchants. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work for me. I need something that works across all banks, works across all platforms, and really gets into the guts of the Visa MasterCard ecosystem. So I'm a serial entrepreneur, self-taught coder. I've always had, either tech businesses or tech-enabled businesses. And so in 2012, I said, you know what, I want to start messing around with this myself. I hired a team of developers, and it was all a rules-based system. And from 2012 to 2016, it gave us, way better performance than any other tool that we could find out there, but it was all internal use only. But the problem with rules is that they don't scale. Like, if this, then that, if this, then that, but then you have conflicting rules. And then, so you have to put them in a weighted algorithm in these decision trees. It just turns into spaghetti, right? And again, there's we had a lot of business, a lot at stake. So like, getting an extra 1% could sometimes mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in transaction flow. And we had over $1 billion in transactions, actually over 1 billion individual transactions in our data mart in 2016. And I said, you know what? This really seems like a problem built for machine learning. And I use that word deliberately because I don't like it when people talk about AI too much. I mean, I use AI, we're an AI driven tool, but it's machine learning, right? So it's sophisticated pattern matching. And so I hired a team of devs from a struggling startup, vetted the crap out of them with some of the guys that you and I actually know through SaaS Academy, came back with a resounding thumbs up. And in 2016, we rebuilt everything from scratch in Microsoft Azure using machine learning, and saw this immediate massive spike in performance on recovering all these declined transactions. And I'm like, you know what? I think I want to take this and turn it into a standalone B2B SaaS business. Because I know I'm not the only one that has this problem, right, Dave?
Right.
And so yeah, in late 2016, we launched the technology for internal use, and in April of 2017, had our first outside revenue as a SaaS business. So I kind of view that as being the birth date of FlexPay. But I mean, but the real story is we had the earned insights and the data and everything to enable us to get into that spanned back over a decade before we actually launched. So yeah, the big overnight success that has the best performing tool in the market. How'd that happen? Well, as you know, Dave, there's always a story behind the story, right?
Overnight success that's only like about 17 years in the making.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
That's great stuff. So we understand a little bit about how FlexPay works, and you can recovering payments. You mentioned account updater earlier, and what else could today's local businesses do to solve, or what's it look like for them to solve and fix that problem without something in place like a machine learning tool like FlexPay?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of low-hanging things, and I love kind of geeking out on this because even if you can't use our technology for some reason, there's a lot of things that you can do, especially in a smaller business, that are good enough, right? Which, especially in a smaller business, sometimes you just need good enough. So I kind of divide what we do into three categories: time, transit, and data cleanup. So time is if you have a declined payment, knowing when to retry it, time of day of week, date of month. This works really well for NSFs, but it also works well for do not honors. And if you ever see a transaction that comes back with a decline code that says do not honor, that is almost a certain guarantee that you have bumped up against the fraud system at the issuing bank, and they're declining your transaction because they think something sketchy is going on, either with the card or with you or with something else. And this is usually like a good solid, depending on the merchant, like about 40% of all your declines come back in this do not honor category. So taking the do not honors and retrying them at a better time actually helps them too, because believe it or not, so when we had a lot of data, right? We had like right now we're up to 5.3 billion transactions in our proprietary data mart. We would see these weird things like all things being equal, same price point, same type of merchant, same acquirer, same everything, right? At JP Morgan Chase, Visa debit, credit card declines would be double at 2 a.m. what they were at 2 p.m. Like, it doesn't mean you have a 100% decline rate at 2 a.m. It's just the declines were double. Like, what's going on there, right? It's because somebody in their infinite wisdom at the bank decided that if a transaction's running through in the middle of the night, it's a higher likelihood that it's fraud. And so, but what happens with like dev companies or like, startups, they take all their batches of recurring billing transactions and they queue them up for off hours when everyone's sleeping, and they run the batch at midnight at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's when I'll run all my transactions through, not knowing that unfortunately they're artificially driving up their decline rate and leaving a bunch of money on the table. The best time to retry transactions, again, if you don't have a machine learning tool that gets really deep on the individual transaction, if you just want a one size fits all approach, make sure you take your NSFs and your do not honors and retry them on Fridays and Saturdays, and try to do it within business hours, ideally in the afternoon East Coast time. And you will see right then and there a big, like magic. All these NSFs and do not honors, all of a sudden, like 15, 20% of them, 22% of them, 30% of them come back approved, whereas they were declined before. What just happened? Well, I can tell you what happened, but just do it.
That is awesome.
Just do that, right?
As you're going through that story, I'm thinking, well, we do that, we do that, we do that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking forward to working with you a little bit more for my day job over here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. No, and again, these are like simple things that, like, if you don't know, you don't know, right? Second thing is transit. If you look at the really big merchants like Amazon and Netflix and Spotify, Microsoft, they never have just one merchant bank. They don't go to Stripe and just open up one account, right? That's good enough if you're a small merchant, right? Because it can be a pain in the butt to have multiple relationships and do your load balancing and stuff. But why do those big merchants have multiple merchant processing relationships? Like in the case of Netflix, they process a certain percentage of their business with WorldPay and a certain percentage with Chase Payment Tech. Why? Because they know that they will get a slightly higher approval ratio if they take certain cards and run them through Chase and other cards and run them through WorldPay. Not all merchant banks are created equal in the eyes of the issuers. And depending on the risk profile and whether or not the issuing bank has had a bad experience with that merchant bank, they start to increase the risk rating of transactions that flow through there. So I always tell people, well, first of all, you should never have a single point of failure. If you've got any kind of meaningful subscription business and you've got all these beautiful customers that have engaged with you and you got product market fit and you've collected all their payment information and you're holding it in a secure manner. I mean, if you lose your ability to process Visa and MasterCard, that asset can never be turned into cash in your bank account. That's a single point of failure in your business that needs to be addressed. And unfortunately, that happens all the time. People are like, well, Stripe's never going to close my account. Yeah, unfortunately, that happens a lot more than you'd like to think. And it's not that Stripe wants to, it's that they're not a bank. They have a sponsoring bank, Wells Fargo, that has all kinds of different like rules that are changing all the time about who they'll work with and who they won't. I had a client the other day. He has a Russian national on his cap table who owns over 25% of the business. And Stripe was doing Wells Fargo was doing due diligence on their merchants, as they always do once a year, and discovered that and terminated their merchant account. He's like, what? Yeah, you have a Russian national that owns more than 25% of your business. So we're shutting down your processing.
Wow.
Yeah, like just these random things that can come out of the blue, but also having a backup account and being able to leverage it and knowing especially what MCC you're in, your merchant category code. I see this all the time. Merchant category code is a 4-digit number that often you don't even know what it is, but when you apply for a merchant account, your merchant provider like Stripe or Braintree or whoever has to identify you as a merchant on the Visa network with a 4-digit code. And that 4-digit merchant category code has a massive impact on your approval ratios. Like we're saying, it can be as low as, this is really extreme, but there's some MCC that approve an average of only 50% of the time and some that approve 98% of the time, right? All things being equal. So getting into the right MCC, and we've done that for even a few SaaS businesses, guys that you and I know, where they're like, because they were selling a product that was something around, debt collection and stuff like that, they ended up tagged as a debt collection MCC, but really they're a SaaS business, a software business. And just switching them from that one MCC to the SaaS MCC, they saw an 8% increase in approval ratios. They went from like an 86% to like a 94% approval rate. It was crazy.
I know we're kind of going and geeking out on this a little bit, which I love. I know for everybody else out there listening may or may not be totally into this, but numbers and just what the opportunity is there is huge. Just want to kind of sum up real quick. I mean, if you're not able to use a company like FlexPay or you don't want to, there are ways you can do some of this stuff on your own. Just kind of sum up the basic one. At the very beginning, you talked about account updater. That can make a huge impact in just updating any fraudulent cards that were changed, expired cards, things like that. Even doing simple things like running those cards at different times of the day, you will get better results. Friday afternoons, Eastern time, just think about that. As an average, if you change it up, take it from 1 a.m., 6 a.m., whatever you're doing, try it at that time. And then having your backup processor. Because if Stripe decides, hey, we're not going to work with it right now, you got to have a backup option. So some really powerful, really important stuff. You kind of need to have your backup plan there. So that's all great stuff, Darryl. I love it. Let me ask you this. So I love listening to you talk also. I mean, it's funny. We're talking numbers, you're talking money coming in, all the data, and you're obviously excited about it. I'm sure you've had some big impacts with some customers and how in being inspiring and turning their business around or maybe having a big impact. So do you have like a story, maybe your most inspiring client that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have a client. Well, we have some really big clients where, I think there's one client in particular in December, we recovered $1.2 million in failed payments for them in 1 month, which was just massive in driving EBITDA and really kind of saved their quarter as a publicly traded company. But the stories that I really enjoy is I'm working with a really, really bright group of guys, 2 brothers in San Diego, and they're incredibly gifted selling like a health and wellness product, and they're doing it right. Like their chargebacks are super low. They really care about brand. They care about company culture. They've got an incredible team of people they put together, these gorgeous offices, and they were just running on razor thin margins. Like so many businesses are. Like if you're not cheating in the space, more often than not, you're running on really, really thin margins. And they were down as low as 7-8% net margin in their business after all was said and done. And they switched on FlexPay, and we were able to recover 56% of all of their failed transactions on their merchant bank. But because they've already paid all the marketing costs, and these are customers that have already said, yes, I want your product and signed up, it's very, very margin rich. Like we're talking like 60% gross margin, right? So a massive amount of that money that we've recovered flows straight down to the bottom line. We are able to take their net margin from 6, 7% all the way up to 15% net margin, money in their pockets. And, I saw them go and, buy cars for some of their like lead executives at their Christmas party. I see what they're doing with like, donating to charities in their area, really avid donators now. They have so much more capital to invest into better hires. They have so much more capital to invest into better products, and they sell really great products to a really engaged audience in the health and wellness space. And the reason why they're able to do all those things, to invest and have all that impact, is because they have a business that, rather than just scraping by, barely making it work, has a little bit more grease between the wheels. And that's literally just because of what we were able to do in taking this ridiculous friction that has no business being there in the first place out of the payments ecosystem. And when I see stories like that, that really kind of lights me up. It makes me feel like, like this is good. And I mean, like, I could talk about the charities too. Like, it's super fun to like work with charities and actually help people give money to the charity that they want to give to, and reducing the friction there. But I, as an entrepreneur, like entrepreneur to entrepreneur, business leader to business leader, when I get to see the impact I have on somebody's business, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, that's just freaking incredible. And it doesn't matter what your monthly expenses are. I'm sorry, your monthly revenue is. I mean, going from 6% to 15%, no matter what bracket you fall into, and that's going to have a huge impact. And that's like we started this call off talking about magic money, and that money that's there, that's falling through the cracks, that people are missing out on. And that's what you let companies do, and you find it for them, which is, I just find that incredible. So that's great stuff. Awesome, Darryl. So I'm gonna put you on the spot right now. So who's going to be listening here, Darryl. What kind of like share hack that all business owners could use right now, and regardless of what industry they're in, if they're a gym, if they're a restaurant, if they're a personal trainer, investor, whatever, just something that small business owners today can use in your years of infinite wisdom.
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's a lot of lessons that I've learned over, FlexPay is my seventh business, so definitely a serial entrepreneur. And the first six were all organically funded and bootstrapped. And I'll tell you, it can be a really lonely ride as a business owner and as an entrepreneur sometimes. But what I've really learned, and what I'd love to share, is that you are not alone. And there's a lot of people out there that want to help you more than you realize. And we're all kind of beat up right now on COVID and the pandemic. It's a really, really tough time for people. But if you step out there and like there's a bunch of people on Clubhouse now that are all like chatting and connecting with one another. There's mastermind groups out there. Like, you and I met each other through SaaS mastermind, right? Where SaaS leaders get together and support one another and come together to learn. And a big piece of what we get out of those masterminds and groups is just even sometimes validation. Yeah, you're doing the right thing. Yeah, this is hard, but you're not alone. You're not alone. And so that's the one message I would say, the one hack. Like, even for me right now, I'm trying to hire a VP of marketing, and it's like breaking my brain, and I just can't find the right person. And I just took the time to sit back and reach out to some of the people in my network and just say, hey, I'm having this problem, and just be open and vulnerable about it. And has anybody else had a problem like this before? And am I thinking about this the right way? And boom, had one of the investors in my company who says, oh, I can introduce you to the CMO of this other company over here. And that CMO says, send me your job description. I'll clean it up so that you're really fine-tuned on the right people. And by the way, here's 3 candidates that I think would be good for you on LinkedIn. And I sent those over to my headhunter. And next thing you know, I'm talking to these high quality people. And how'd that all start? Because I lifted my hand up and I said, hey, I'm having a hard time. I'm lucky enough to have really good investors in my business, so they're already engaged and committed. But there are groups out there. There's mastermind groups on LinkedIn and on Facebook and on Clubhouse. And just put yourself out there and be willing to be open and vulnerable and say, hey, I need help. And you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people out there, especially in the entrepreneurial communities, who want to help.
And that's great advice. And it's something where it's tough to realize that, because you got to be smart enough to realize that, hey, you don't know everything. And there's a certain skill set that requires, and you have to be, it's admitting to yourself, hey, you're not perfect. And people think these small business owners, people who start their own business, They know everything. Guess what? We don't.
Yeah.
We're just a
And
little bit more daring.
I'd even say if you
I-
think you know everything, you're going to get a wake up call real quick because you're going to hit the wall,
exactly.
and
Smack
it's not going
across
to
the
be
face.
pleasant.
Exactly. So that's awesome advice to share. I mean, so go out and seek some help from people who've been through it too, or who are going through it, or have been through it, because you're far from alone. And that's awesome. I love hearing that. So here's one of my favorite parts of interviewing people is I like to kind of sit back and let you do the work for a second. So Darryl, if we've been talking for a little bit and I love the conversation, but what question did I miss? What's the question that I should ask you that can help small business owners just from your years of experience and your 7 different businesses that you've run? What I miss? What question should I ask you?
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that I love to talk about is, and it kind of comes along with that same sort of theme of like you're not alone. There's more people out there that want to help you than maybe you first realize. But I often tell people that one of the smartest things that I ever did in building FlexPay was before I even had a single dollar of external revenue from external clients. I went and built an advisory board and just reached out to people in my network, and I even offered them in some cases a little bit of equity in the company, like really super small amounts, but because I knew that this is a big problem and it's going to require a lot of help from really smart people. And and I was humbled to see how many people said yeah, absolutely. And but I was very tactical about, like, uh, you and I both know Dan Martell, and Dan Martell talks about this, and he says, what are the 8 things that if you had those 8 things, your success as a small business owner would be an absolute foregone conclusion. Like, just it's absolutely guaranteed and automatic that if you had those 8 things, you'd be able to 10x your business. And it's not even a question as to whether you'd be able to 10x your business. It would be a foregone conclusion. And maybe you don't want to 10x your business, but just imagine, like, and every business has got like kind of like the top 8 things. And once you identify what those 8 things are, then you can start to think about, well, who are the people that could possibly fill those buckets that I know, or maybe even that I don't know, that I could reach out to cold on LinkedIn and tell them about what it is that I'm doing. And even if it's not a fit for them, maybe they know somebody that it would be a fit who could come and help me out. And building that advisory board was just such a game changer. Have this group of like really invested, committed, smart people that check certain boxes for me in my business was awesome. And I love telling other people about that, because again, you'd be surprised how many people out there are willing to, they understand that building a business is hard, and you are deciding to lift your hand up and say, yeah, I'm going to go do this. But there's other
That's
people that
great.
want to help you along that journey.
And that advisory board, it sounds all nice and fancy, but I mean, it can, for every type of business out there, you can have your own advisory board. I mean, if you're opening up your own diner, I mean, maybe you have a mentor that you worked with that had their own restaurant beforehand. It's someone you can go to and shoot the breeze with, keep your sanity. They've gone through it. You can bounce
Yes.
ideas off of each other. Just again, realizing that you're not alone out there is so powerful, and it's such
Yeah, I love
so
that you said
uplifting
that,
too.
Dave. Like, that's such an important point. Like, you don't have to think about it as being all formal, like an advisory board, or like telling
Mhm.
people, I would like to have you on my board of advisors. Man, just like somebody that like, again, be very like, be rational about it, and use that, like the 8 boxes, the 8 buckets as a framework. But then once you identify those people, just like reach out and hang out and shoot the breeze with them, and get that advice. Sometimes all you just need, like you said, is a hearing ear and some validation, or like, one little tweak that improves your business by a 0.5%. But then, next week it's another 0.5% from somewhere else. And another week it's a 0.5% from somewhere else. And next thing you know, you're rolling.
And one thing that I love from just doing this podcast here is being introduced and talking to different people. And one thing that is so common, everybody wants to help. I mean, everybody's been through, people have been in your shoes before. Like if you're a business owner having a challenge, there are people out there who can and who will help you. You just have to find them and ask. And there's so many boards out there, whether it's Facebook, whether it's I mean, there's so many different Facebook groups, and that'd be a great place to start. But even just looking
Mhm.
at your mentors, just going and using them, asking them to help, because odds are they will. So that's really powerful stuff. I love that. So Darryl, this has been awesome chatting with you. Tell me a little bit, where can our audience find you? Where are you most active? Like whether it's on social or website, hook us up.
Yeah,
Where can we find you?
I'm not a huge social media guy, but I am on Facebook. It's probably the platform I spend the most time on just because I'm in a lot of really high quality closed groups. So I don't really post much, but it's a great way for people to find me and kind of reach out and DM me. Also, flexpay.io, our website, has got like a contact information in there, and my email is super easy. It's just Darryl@flexpay.io. So I don't mind throwing that out there. If any of this resonates and you want a little bit of like tips or advice, I allocate a certain percentage of my week every week to kind of just like giving back and doing like the mentorship and talking to like kids who are getting into startups or like entrepreneurs who are struggling with something. And I love that kind of stuff, kind of like the giving back stuff. It lights you up and it makes you feel good. So
makes your day worthwhile.
yeah.
So Darryl, that's awesome. Everybody will have the information underneath in the show notes as well for you to check out. But Darryl, we appreciate being on here. I wish you the best of luck. Look forward to I know we talked about doing some work together as well. So hopefully we can bring all that around, and wish you the best of luck moving forward, bud. We appreciate you.
Thanks again for having me, Dave. This was a lot of fun.
Wow. So that was just some incredible stuff. So many tips, tricks, and things to implement. Remember, that was a lot of advice that was just shared right there. Advice that every type of business can use. So remember, find those couple of things that are fit for you. Figure out a plan, how to implement them, what to do. Don't try and do everything all at once right away. Remember that old saying, that old question, how do you eat an elephant? Well, if you know the phrase, you probably know where I'm going with this. But you can't do everything at one time. Remember, you eat that elephant simply one bite at a time. Set your plan, stick to it. So I want to give thanks to our awesome guest. If you want to find out more about today's topic and guests, make sure to check out our show notes. All the guest information is there on our website, and that website is localbusinesshacks.com. Now, there's a dash between each word, so it's www.local-business-hacks.com. Check that out. And of course, I want to give a big thanks to you for listening. So if you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Leave a review on whatever service you're listening to this on. And if you have any questions or just want to keep the party going, please join our Facebook group at Local Business Hacks. Till next time, cheers.